on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
I don't know if any people who've ever populated this island would have survived here without seals and sealing. And who are these people to come from away and tell me that what I was doing and what everything my parents and my grandparents were doing was wrong?
Most radical thinkers are not interested in critical thought process or anything that would go against what they want to believe. And that's when there's no conversation to be had.
The modern contemporary world is here, but the people here have a strong sense of who they are and the heritage.
Here in Newfoundland, there's still a lot of living memory. Every time I'm working with a pelt, I'll take a minute and I'll say, you know what, thank you for being here, and just like was a living, breathing creature, and I appreciate that life and I'm thankful for it.
People struggle sometimes to understand that you can love and appreciate a species that you eat.
It is a sustainable hunt. It is a very regulated hunt. It is a delicious product.
Seals managed to get into this really unique sort of category of Disneyfication. If you got too close to one and it felt threatened, it'd take the face off you.
Episode 48 of the WildFed podcast, Seal Hunting, Newfoundland's Cultural Heritage, with Lori McCarthy and Clare Dawn Fowler, is brought to you by Surthrival. Surthrival reminds you that the flu season is upon us, and that this year in particular, it's crucial that you're maintaining, fortifying, and even building your immune system. Right now until September 24th, all of Surthrival's immune products are 10% off with the coupon code GETREADY. That's Surthrival Colostrum, Vitamin D3, K2, and Surthrival's legendary Reishi and Chaga Dual extracts. Again, it's 10% off with the coupon code GETREADY. Head over to surthrival.com to start fortifying your immune system now. This episode's also brought to you by Wild Food Warehouse. Wild Food Warehouse carries premium wild rice harvested by canoe in Minnesota. I remember the first time I tried real, uncultivated wild rice. Before then, I used to buy what's sold as wild rice in supermarkets, thinking it was the real thing. And I liked it, sort of. It never really cooked all the way through, though, so I was left thinking wild rice was a rubbery and tough-to-chew aquatic grain. What I didn't know was that this wasn't really wild rice at all, but rather a paddy-grown agricultural product. Once I tried the real thing, which cooks soft like brown rice, but with a richer, nuttier, almost smoky flavor, I realized I'd have to harvest myself or purchase it from folks like Wild Food Warehouse. If you're a regular listener, you already appreciate the value of truly wild foods. With winter on its way, now's a great time to stock your pantry. Wild Food Warehouse sells ethically harvested wild rice, collected by hand and parched over a wood fire and delivered directly to your door. It makes a great meal on its own, and it pairs perfectly with your other hunted, fished, or foraged ingredients. Price breaks start at £5, and the coupon code WildFed gets you 10% off your order. Remember, this is a truly wild product, so supplies are limited. Go to wildfoodwarehouse.com and use the coupon code WildFed for 10% off your order. Hey, just a quick reminder, WildFed's Premium Hunter Orange Trucker hats are on sale now. So if you're hunting this fall and you need an orange hat to stay safe and legal, or you just want to keep yourself or your family safe this season, head over to wild-fed.com and use the coupon code HAT25 for 25% off any hat in our store. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Okay, I'm eager to introduce today's show and guests, but I have a big announcement I want to make first. If you've been over to the WildFed website or looked for episode 1 on YouTube, you might have noticed neither are currently available. Well, we've just signed a licensing agreement with a prominent network. I'll release more details soon, but in early 2021, WildFed will have a new home. So if you've already purchased season 1 from us directly, we'll continue to keep your streaming services available. And if you've been waiting to see the show, you'll soon see it debuting in its new location. So a huge thank you for all the support you've given us. I'm really excited for where we can take this show, brand, and lifestyle with a bit of network help. Of course, we've retained the business and brand, so this isn't a corporate takeover, but rather an opportunity to work together to uplevel what we're already doing and take this message of wild foods and human nature integration to even more people. We've been working on this for a while, so it's really exciting for us. And naturally, you can still count on this podcast to keep coming out every week as well. Now, on to today's show. We recorded this interview in Newfoundland, Canada with Lori McCarthy, who you might remember from previous episodes. Her shows are some of our most liked, and her good friend Clare Dawn Fowler, who works with seal pelts in her textile business and who speaks on behalf of what has become, unfortunately, a really controversial topic: Canada's seal hunt. Ever since the winter of 1972, when Richard Nixon signed the Marine Mammal Protection Act, strictly prohibiting any seal hunting or the importation of seal-based products here in the United States, that prohibition and its accompanying attitudes have tremendously impacted what has always been a sustainable and traditional subsistence and textile hunt in Newfoundland. Add to that the disingenuous ad campaigns of major animal rights and environmental activist groups, and you have a traditional lifeway that has been all but stifled. In a place as remote and rugged as Newfoundland, a place that desperately wants to maintain its connection to its traditional way of life, the emotional manipulation by agenda-driven organizations has led to what might be called excessive regulation, and certainly to a taboo that few ever dare to question. But are seals even imperiled? Consider this. Here in the Gulf of Maine, our large, protected seal population, combined with the rapidly warming waters, has attracted the attention of great white sharks who've been sighted more and more frequently here. In fact, you may have read that just this year, to the surprise of biologists and the shock of the public, Maine experienced its first white shark attack on a human being in its recorded history. Tragically, this was a fatal attack. Of course, this shark wasn't hunting a person on purpose, but rather it was almost certainly a case of mistaken identity. In her wetsuit, she no doubt looked like one of Maine's many seals. Incidentally, I'll be following up on that story in an upcoming interview. Now, I'm not mentioning this to say that having a large population of seals or visitation from white sharks is a problem. I think most of us welcome the rich biodiversity. But instead to indicate that the seal population is thriving and growing, one might even say out of proportion to the other fisheries, which are much more managed for human use. I hope that, in time, especially as the echo of the unregulated, industrialized whale hunt fades into the recesses of history, the topic of a conservation-oriented marine mammal hunt could be readdressed. After all, conservation-based hunting here in the U.S. has been an incredibly powerful tool for keeping animals on our landscape, while still allowing for limited human use of these beautiful living but renewable resources. After all, if moose and bear and deer, why not seals? So it's my hope that this interview gives you some perspective on the seal hunt, what it's really about, how it fits into the lifeway of the peoples of Newfoundland, and why it might not be an antiquated relic from a less conscientious and humane time, but rather how seals and seal hunting could, and I dare say should, be regulated like the hunt of so many other land-based mammals. Both of the women you'll hear from today have a deep connection to these animals. Lori, more from a food perspective, and Clare from more of a textile perspective. But both grew up in a place where traditional use has been overshadowed by manufactured public outcry. And I think it's time that the public reevaluates this. It's my hope that this interview, in some small way, can contribute to that reevaluation. After all, what's truly more sustainable? A well-regulated hunt for an animal whose abundant numbers are not just stable but growing? Or the importation of unsustainably produced and often finite resources from the outside into a remote island at the easternmost edge of the North Atlantic? Of course, everything's about balances, but I suspect that after hearing from these women, you might conclude that the balance lies on the side of Newfoundland's traditional seal hunt. And one last thing, at the time we recorded this, I still hadn't tried seal meat. Within a day or two, though, Lori had remedied that, searing some seal loins for us, cooked simply with a bit of salt and pepper. Suffice it to say, it was as good as any venison I'd ever had.
Well, I am here in Newfoundland.
No, you're not in Newfoundland.
What?
Newfoundland.
Oh, God, I want to leave it. I'm in Newfoundland.
Much better.
Here I am in Newfoundland with my producer, Grant Giuliano.
Hello, everybody.
We're here with our host, Lori McCarthy, and our guest today, Clare Dawn. Thank you, folks, for having us and for being here.
Thanks for coming to chat with me.
And let's start there. The pronunciation, just for everybody, we would say Newfoundland.
I thought I was in the know by saying Newfoundland.
Yeah, I thought we were being cool about it.
Instead of Newfoundland.
Yeah.
You must have been talking to those couple of polite Newfoundlanders that wouldn't correct you.
Well, we weren't talking.
We never cleared it up.
Yeah, this is just we brought this with us. I think. What were we saying? It's like you wouldn't say like, oh, I'm from Finland.
Finland. It's more like Disneyland.
Yeah, Disney. Yeah, it's more like Disneyland.
But that's how we try to explain to people that come here. It's like Disneyland. The emphasis is on the land. Mm-hmm. But it's Newfoundland.
Also, while I should say it, while the outside world would say we're in Canada, I've heard otherwise since I've been here.
Depends on how old the person is you're talking to.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
I think as Newfoundlanders, we all still feel like we're Newfoundlanders. You know, if someone said to me, where you're from, I'd just say Newfoundland. I wouldn't say Canada. While we are part of Canada since 49, it's not something that you don't really, I guess, identify as a Canadian. I don't know why.
Well, it's such a challenge to get here. I mean, no one ever just takes a wrong turn off the Trans-Canada Highway and bam, you end up in Newfoundland. Like, it takes a lot of planning, energy, money, scheduling in order to get here. So there's always been that little bit of a physical disconnect, to say the least, to get here. And my grandparents, for example, they were born Newfoundlanders. They weren't born Canadians.
Yeah.
So when Newfoundland joined Canada in 1949, they were still, like, they considered themselves Newfoundlanders.
Yeah. And I don't see, like, Canadian flags everywhere the way I would in Quebec or Ontario. Sure, they're there, but I'm not seeing them proudly, like, waving in the
Yeah, if you got
skyline.
one flagful, you're putting up a Newfoundland flag. Yeah.
That's great.
And it's the Republic flag.
Is it a republic?
There
Used to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Understood. Claire, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So my name is Claire. I am a craftsperson, textile artist, and my body of work focuses mainly on the use of sealskin and seal fur. So some leather, some fur. Now, I do incorporate a lot of other elements into it that are strongly Newfoundland based. So I'll do knitting projects, for example, and they will have a seal fur yoke around them or some sort of incorporation. Usually, when I work with leather, I do my best to work with Newfoundland seal leather. I can only get so much of it, so some of the other are cow leathers from God only knows where they come from.
Got it.
And I stick with seal fur because it's the only thing I use that's local. So when you look around this room that we're in right now, everything here that you'll see besides the wood and the seal fur comes from somewhere else. And I mean, I can do my best to trace that back to wherever it might come from in the world, but when I want to use something local, I just want to be able to go and get it.
Yeah.
You know.
It's interesting, Lori, we've been hanging with you for a few days, and it's kind of a similar thing with food in that here, it's like you've exposed us in just a few days to quite a few local foods. But like everywhere in the world, most of the food around is not from here, right? And then there's these ingredients that are still really celebrated here. Does that feel accurate too?
Yeah, they're definitely celebrated, you know, and not only on special occasions. You know, a lot of the diet in Newfoundland is still consumed here, from here, right? Especially fishing and like codfish and some of the other stuff, even when it comes to seal. Like seal is something now that shows up in the spring of the year during the hunt, but, you know, it'll cause 200 people to line up at the fish truck.
Does it really?
Yeah.
For the meat?
Yes.
For the meat,
Yeah, for the flippers. And most local people only eat the flippers. And they're harvested and then... and then they're sold in the local fish shops. But more of that is about the tradition of it than it is about...
not subsistence, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Tell people who you are and what you do, just for some context.
So I'm Lori McCarthy, and I run a company introducing people to the food of here in a cultural sense, but not only as a very traditional food, not... only where it was at a particular time frame, because I think the mission is to keep the foods of here on our plates, and I think if we're going to do that, we're going to have to change how we put it on the plates. So I think for as much as culture and tradition that I talk about all the time, we really need to see this food come out of the past and into the present and see it there into the future for me.
And I think we're in a really fortunate space that here in Newfoundland, there's still a lot of living memory. Because I talk to people who are from, say, BC or whatever and have moved here. And where they come from, if they want traditional knowledge and skills, there's nobody that they can talk to about it anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas here, there's still a group of people. Now, they're getting older, and that body of people is getting smaller all the time, but they're still here, so you just need to search them out. And I feel like we're really, really lucky and fortunate that we still have that here. For example, 2 years ago, I really wanted to know about bark tanning. And so around this area...
Oh, you're talking about some way back stuff then.
But there's still people here who do it. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize we were going that far back. Bark tanning has kind of disappeared where we live, for sure. You know.
So I was able to get enough information out of him and then do some research online. And then I did a couple of pelts myself just out in the back of the house. And everything I used was everything I used, I guess, was healthy enough that I could reintroduce it back into the environment and it wasn't going to have any detrimental effect.
Right.
Like I could actually put my hands in it if I wanted to.
Yeah, compared to the leather tanning that's
Totally.
done industrially.
Yeah.
I've got some hides back of bears that I can't imagine doing anything with except hanging on a wall, because when I get close to them, the chemical saturation from the tanneries is really intense.
Right.
So it's nice when you have a brain tan or a bark tan like that, because it
Yeah.
feels like a clean organic substance
Yeah.
to you.
And it's a very different smell. And I don't mind it at all because I guess there's a pervasive odor of, I used spruce bark to tan what I
Okay,
did.
yeah.
And I just love it. Every time I get close to it, I can smell the spruce on it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
And then from the food perspective, it's similar here, isn't it? That there's this memory still alive and things are kept alive.
Yeah, we're still very close to it, right? So Claire is able to find someone for a technique like that, and if I'm looking for a preservation technique, I can still go find someone. So a lot of that stuff is less than 100 years ago was very popular, right? It was well eaten like that. It was, and we haven't been here that long in Newfoundland in a certain sense when it comes to Europeans being here, right? So when I go looking for,
How long, do you know?
was it 500 years?
Yeah.
There's some sign of, first Europeans come in the late 1400s, definitely 1500s. But yeah, so when you go looking for that kind of knowledge or when it comes to food, I can still go to my grandfather and say, Pop, do you remember? And he's like, oh my God, yes, Lori, right? So we're still so close to it that there is still an opportunity for us to capture the knowledge and preservation techniques and tough stuff like bark tan techniques.
Yeah.
So, but I feel it's like a critical time, right? So the likes of Clare, like how many people's going at that? There's not many people going at that. It's like if you're the only person now that knows how to do that.
And my God, I can't imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the stuff that I'm reading out of Labrador now about how they found this one old cookbook in the library. One of the biggest problems with this big game, and moose was introduced here, right? So one of the biggest problems is how we're going to preserve it. Like there was in Nan's time, they weren't bottling, they weren't salting meat like that.
Yeah, they didn't have the refrigeration options.
Right, right. I mean, Mom grew up without running water. They carried wood to school. There was no electricity.
Oh, really? They carried wood to school?
They did,
I haven't heard
right?
that one before.
But, and I know it sounds like, wow, that's so long ago, but I mean, Mom's only 70. And so that was very common.
Yeah, we met her today. She's quite vibrant.
Right. So Mom can scurry up over the cliffs like a ghost still, right? That's all the fog here, right?
Well, she said to me
young.
yesterday, she said the fog here keeps the women young.
It's good. That's what I tell the tourists. It's good for their complexion.
Yeah. But, so when it comes to that critical time, I think it is now for young people to start paying attention to that stuff. And when it comes back to this book I got in the library about how they used to keep caribou, from going off. I haven't quite figured it out, but this woman talks about at the end of the hall in this old 2-story house they used to have, her father used to hang the caribou side up at the end of the hall, and he used to coat it in flour.
Go away.
So it would have been away from the light because most end of halls didn't have windows back then, which made sense, right? So rancidity would be low. And I'm assuming that the flour was to keep the flies from laying larvae.
Oh, okay.
And she said whenever you want
just dry out.
Well, you'd think it would certainly dry out, yeah. So whenever he wanted a piece, they'd go and cut it off and they'd soak it, and then they'd cook it. And he would go back and he would pat that open piece with flour again. And that was like the highlight of, I think, my month. Like to find those preservation techniques and how they're, so we're still close enough to it. But I think the time is now to capture it.
How'd you two meet? How long have you known each other?
Not that long. We met through a friend. I mean, I was following Lori on Instagram for a while because, I just really was, so impressed and inspired by what she's doing. And then a mutual friend of both of ours, I think, connected us for the first time. Or maybe we just sort of skirted each other in circles, mutual circles. Yeah.
Like Claire also attends the that seal dinner that we do up in Ottawa.
Okay.
Yeah, the 5-course seal dinner that we do up on Parliament Hill, which is part of what when I mentioned about seeing this food come from the past onto the plates of the present and into the future. That's when you can serve something like that. I mean, it's something so normal that we always ate, always grew up with. And now it almost seems like some kind of victory to be able to serve it in a place like that, which
It's
seems
so true.
Which
Yeah.
it's like an odd juxtaposition. Like I don't even like that. I think that.
Is there a lot of pushback for that meal?
No,
No.
no,
Not on the local level. You don't really have
no, no. And the people who come from north down, like they come down from the north and join us, and chefs and politicians, but it's to the point where we have to make a point of it now.
Yep.
And even that, like, doesn't sit well with me, right?
Right. Yeah, I
Makes me
understand.
think, right?
I want to get into this idea of the seals in a minute, but I want to say that I have this observation. I don't know you that well. We've just met, but Lori, I've spent a little more time with you. But I have this observation about both of you that you're taking these things that are really traditional, but then you're bringing them into. With you, Lori, it feels like there's got to be. You have this solid base of the foods you grew up with that you are able to sort of share with people, but then it looks like you're finding other things that people maybe didn't use, and you're using those now too.
Yeah.
And you're taking this product of seal leather, hide, fur, and doing things with it that are more modern, right? So how is that received here in such a place with such a, I'll say conservative, I don't mean politically, but I mean like socially conservative place? People are really supportive of it because they love that you're working with things from the past. Do they have any issues with the direction things going, or do you get mostly like support for it?
Mostly support
That's
for it.
awesome.
Same,
Yeah.
mostly
Yeah.
support.
And I think that's why we want to support it. We are people that like to support each other, and especially the population here is an aging population for sure. And those people love it. Love that people are coming from all around the world now, and I'm sitting on the beach and I'm serving them seal and I'm serving them cod's head stew. They love that because they build up this pride for the food. Where here, a lot of the food here, like in most poverty food was almost something that you were ashamed of, right?
Okay.
When Pop talks about eating lobster in his time, so Pop is
Yeah.
92 now,
Pop's the same way, my pop, yeah.
right? They talk about how,
It was only the poor people would eat lobster.
right, so you were embarrassed that you had to eat lobster.
Yeah.
And the kids who were poor off went to school with lobster sandwiches. So
Imagine.
there was,
What
right?
a turnaround, right?
Yeah, but there was that shame associated with the food you ate. And now they just can't get over it. They can't get over that people would come here and sit around and eat cod tongues,
Yeah.
right? But it is, you can feel that sense of pride in them when they were like,
It's interesting how so much of the world lived close to the land. Then as urban centers sprang up, people flooded into those, developed all that city culture, and felt like they had really reached the pinnacle. And then they got so tired of that world, they start filtering back out to want to go explore the countryside again. And then the things that were common are now becoming chic. And we've talked a lot this week, Lori, about the challenges that presents when people can no longer afford to live in their own communities.
Yeah.
You know, when the fishermen can't afford to live on the coastal properties anymore, or things start to get gentrified so heavily, and what happens when, I mean, it's just a strange thing, like when lobster goes to, $14 a pound or whatever it is. Okay, I want to talk about sealing, and I want to talk about seals and the culture here. I grew up in the States, the Northeast, where I grew up in the era of the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and I grew up around Save the Whales, and the idea of seals being killed for food or for hides to people in the States who are uninitiated to it is like, it's a given that you wouldn't do that. It's more than shocking because it's like a taboo, and a taboo is usually something you don't even know there's a prohibition against. That's why it's a taboo. So it's not a law. It's like a unspoken rule that you've grown up with. And then as you get exposed to sort of the ideas of hunting, for me, I get exposed to the ideas of hunting and conservation. You start to realize, like, wait a second, why are these animals in this really unique category over here? I want to explore that a little bit. I want to explore what it was like before that and how they were used here, and then kind of what's happening now. You talk about this, Claire, a lot more than I do, so I'm curious if you have a great starting point, or if you want me to sort of just dive in as we sort of lay the landscape. I mean,
Well, I mean, for me, the topic is so broad and so personal. I mean, I have all kinds of thoughts about how seals managed to get into this really unique sort of category of Disneyfication.
Yeah.
Because they're incredible hunters. They're really efficient.
Yeah.
And if you got too close to one and it felt threatened, it'd take the face off you. You know what I mean? But people feel like they can just go up to them and cuddle them.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that, sometimes I'll do pop-ups in Kitty Vitty. I don't know if Lori's taking you guys
we actually went down there. Yeah.
So sometimes seals pop up on the slipways down there. And I don't know how many times I see people get way too close to them.
Oh, wow.
And they don't understand that this
What's
is
it
not
like
a teddy
inside
bear.
their mouth? I don't know.
I hope I never find out.
But I mean, they're toothy.
Yeah. Well, they've got rows of teeth.
Right. Oh, they do. Yeah. Okay. I mean, because obviously they're eating tremendous amounts of fish, right? Traditionally, though, seal for clothing and for food here must date back pre-European to indigenous peoples who are here, right?
Thousands and thousands of years.
And you guys were telling me before that, I mean, they were just crucial to surviving here. Say a bit about that.
Well, I don't know if any people who've ever populated this island would have survived here without seals and sealing. Because our summer season is very short, as both of you are coming to realize, seeing as you've been here. I mean, the weather it's okay, but it's certainly not something where you could grow a myriad of crops or a huge variety. I mean, root vegetables grow here probably better than just about anything else. And Lori, you can speak to this better than I can about what will actually grow here.
But we can't put seeds in the ground till the middle of June.
But you're talking photoperiod now, so that's the light levels. But then also you have a lack of deep topsoils here too.
And I was just about to get to that. And so out on the barrens and out on the bogs, I mean, nothing really grows there.
Right. There's no soil, like you've seen, right? You boys were out in Willis Bay yesterday, out in the barrens. Right. So
yeah, it looks like a rocky prominence is stuck out of the ocean, and just this thin layer of biomass sits on the top of it.
It's like just a layer of decomposition.
Yeah, and then the trees here are. It was interesting driving into town this morning. Now that I've got a better sense of the place, and when we're out in the countryside, it's almost exclusively coniferous trees. So it's balsams and black spruces and tamaracks. And then as we rolled into town, you see all this horticulture, because obviously people have brought in trees from outside. So I saw so many maples, and I saw, and ornamentals, and, all these different hardwoods and species that obviously have been brought into the urban area. Yep. But outside of here, it's a pretty rigorous environment.
Right. And so, there's fishing, obviously, and that's that culture here. And throughout the summer, you fish and you get what you need to eat, and then you get what you can store and what you can cure and what you can dry and what you can whatever. Then you go through the winter season, which is pretty long here. Then you get to spring. And spring is when the seals come. That's when the ice flows happen, and the seals come with the ice flows. By the time you get to spring, you're pretty desperate for something sensible to eat. You're pretty desperate for anything really of substance to eat. And so in the spring of the year, that's when the seals come, and that's when people would, get their first word to come to mind is fill, but it's not really that. You just get what you need to sustain yourself, and you go from there and wait for the next summer season to start and the next fishing season to start.
Yeah, it was known as the hungry month of March.
Totally. Yep.
So that. And we'll still use that today, right? We'll say, but it's the hungry month of March, right?
Oh, okay.
Because that was when everything was getting slim in the cellar, right?
Yeah.
And so, the root crops that we plant now, I mean, they come out of the ground end of August, early November. And then by the time March rolls around, they're gone, right? So, and again, that's just that is only in Mom's time, right?
Yep. Yeah,
so
it's not that long ago.
They lived in little tiny communities. It took 2 hours to get into town where horse and cart only came, and they didn't leave their town, right? So there was not like there was, like it is now, there was no grocery stores, there was no supplies of this stuff. So we were very self-sustaining outside of sugar, flour, the kind of stuff that came over, right? But the vegetables and stuff were pretty much, everyone had their own garden. Everyone truly lived off the land.
Right, and so when someone says, well, why wouldn't you eat it? And, well, of course, why wouldn't I eat it? Right. So for me, it's a different sort of inflection on the question.
Yeah. Right.
It's absolutely relevant here.
Yeah.
And most people, as Lori was saying earlier, are familiar with the flippers or the shoulders. It's, this area up here is what you're eating. But the loins, like the way that I've had them with Lori, Lori's done them, are absolutely amazing. And I always wonder, Nan and Pop, why did you never choose this part? It's so much nicer.
But they never choose it. It didn't matter how it was cut up, because it was all going in the oven, and it was going to be slow cooked, long. And but you ate because you needed to eat. It wasn't about sitting around enjoying,
it was a different
we've elevated
experience.
food to this
absolutely
art level that it shows how far away from subsistence we are.
Right.
And I mean, I love cuisine, so I'm not that's not a knock against
totally.
it, but it's just demonstrative of how wealthy we have all become.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, here in North America. I mean, even our poor are living so well, really. And it's interesting what you were just saying about how recent this stuff was, because you got this generation who's coming up now who doesn't remember a time before smartphones and internet, and how difficult it must be for them to picture how recent some of this stuff was. It just must seem so far away because of what they have access to.
Oh, yeah, with my little guy, it blows his mind. I know he's only 6 and he's very limited life experience, I know. But it blows his mind sometimes when we go into communities and, you know, we'll explore old root cellars. And he'll be like, Mom, what was this for? I'm like, well, back in a time, this was like somebody's fridge.
Yeah.
This is where they kept their things for the winter. And he was like, there's nothing here, Mom. There's only rocks and dirt. Like, what do you mean this kept vegetables fresh? Right?
Yeah.
It's so recent.
But they knew how to control the humidity. They knew how to control the temperature. They knew, you know, the people knew how to do those things.
Yeah. And that's our opportunity to hold on to it still in a certain sense, right? And make sure that it is there. These foods and that we enjoy today, and some would call it privilege, to be able to eat like I eat. You know, the freezer's full of turds and rabbits and ducks and like basically a full wild food diet when it comes to protein, right? But that is almost like a luxury today.
Yeah.
It's so hard to access this food now.
Yeah.
You know, unless you hunt yourself, and that there's like the dwindling hunters, right? So yeah, like the first thing I do, even when I get codfish, like you heard me this morning, ask Mom if she wanted to bring the livers and the britchens over to Pop.
The britchens being the roe
Yeah,
sacks.
yeah, and because they can't access it anymore. Whereas when I talked to you about Neve and the seal hunt up in Iqaluit, the elders were the first to get the meat when it comes in, right when the seals come in. It is a community event, and it is made sure that everyone gets access to it.
Yeah. A couple things that come to mind for me. One being that when you travel around going to the finest restaurants in different areas, what you see is game meats and foraged ingredients. And so it's funny that for the wealthiest amongst us, they're after these foods, which we were just talking about, were traditionally sort of looked down upon once agriculture and processed food got big.
Yeah.
Now it's a privilege to have the foods that before it would have been I don't know, it's just...
Well, they're the
bizarre.
trendsetters.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I told Dad that I was learning how to butcher lamb, and we grew up on a lamb farm, and Dad said, "Sure, Lori, you don't have to do that anymore." And that was truly a moment where that was my like heavy thought moment, right? And I'm thinking about this going, that's it. So when you didn't have to do it anymore, you didn't. When you were better off enough where you could buy it, well, then you were amongst those people who could afford to buy food through the monetary system. And we haven't been out of that for very long, right?
Yeah. And when we say processed food now, it typically carries a really negative connotation. But when you start processing your own food, excuse me, or your own fibers, you kind of go like, oh, I see why there was an interest in getting some help with this, because this is most of the work.
It's
The
hard.
fun part's like sitting down to eat it and tell the stories. The hard part is breaking it all down, processing it all.
I mean, when I was processing that leather last summer, fleshing is really hard. Like really, really hard. So I can see
and you
how
can't really stop, right? It's not
No.
like you can do 20 minutes, go do something else, come back, right? You got to like work
No, you're
these hides.
invested for the day, right?
Yeah.
Or longer, depending on how strong you are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Before we start talking about these, I want to go into these ice flows a little bit and just kind of get a picture in my mind of what that's like. But to set the stage for folks listening, when we got here, I made a comment to Lori and said that, being this far north, and she's like laughs at me. And something clicked for me that I live in a country where I live in the northeasternmost state. So when I'm talking to people, they're always like, you're from the north, and they're from the south or whatever. I think of Maine as being north. And then when I look on the map for here, it's like, okay, I got to go through all of Nova Scotia and then across probably the Hudson Bay there, right? And then over to, this feels very north to me, but you live in a country with much more northern tiers to it. So to you, it's like, no, we're not in the north, right? You kind of laugh. But then also, realizing that you're coastal too. So what are your winters like here?
They're temperate, I would say.
Yeah, they are.
I mean,
On
the temperature fluctuates quite a bit.
On the east coast of Newfoundland, because from here, there's nothing until you hit England, right? As the crow flies, we'll call it, right? So the western side of Newfoundland is they get a lot more snow. They get colder winters and hotter summers. But the island's pretty big, right? So it takes, almost 12 hours to drive.
So that's like on the bay side or the straight side over there? Like
yeah. On the straight side.
But here on the open Atlantic side,
right.
You're more temperate.
Yeah, exactly. We can get 2 feet of snow and then it can be gone in 2 days.
That's incredible. But you do get the heavy snows will come, but it doesn't accumulate here on the ground.
It doesn't stay like it does on the west coast. Now it's too wet over here. See, it's just too moist.
Breeze coming off the
absolutely.
water all the
so
time.
We'll get the northern, stream come down, and then the warmer Gulf Stream come up, and then it's just fog and rain, and the temperature just goes all over the place then.
But this ice that we're talking about, so the seals are coming down with the ice.
With the pack ice.
If we were watching, the pack ice is sea ice?
Yep.
Okay, if I was watching one of those time lapse you'll see on like a David Attenborough documentary, and we're going to watch, summer to winter, and we see the freeze happen over the northern hemisphere, you guys are below the ice, but then that ice must break up and flow down here?
It does,
So where's that coming from?
Rob, from Greenland, Iceland, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that comes in the spring of the year. And there's still communities here that only are operated by coastal boat. Most of Labrador is only by coastal boat. So when that ice comes in, you're not getting anywhere, right? The supply boats are not getting in. So there's times here, even in St. John's, if the boats can't get in because of the ice, then we could be without, vegetables and stuff for, definitely for days, right? Yeah. You can, it's so impactful at that moment. Yeah. You truly get a sense of how you're at the mercy of
isolated
the land,
here.
right? Yeah.
And I grew up on a smaller island just outside St. John's, Bell Island, so it's in the middle of Conception Bay. And so Conception Bay opens up sort of northish, we'll say. And when the ice flows come down, the ice will come right into that bay, and then that island is cut off from the main island.
How many people are on that island?
Oh, goodness.
A little less than 3,000 now?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, and on this island, all of this whole island is 500,000?
Yeah.
You must have years then of bad ice and years of good ice. Like, what are ideal conditions for you guys? Because if there's no ice, then you don't get the seals.
Yeah.
So that's not good. And then if you have too much ice, you're isolated off.
Yeah.
Cut off. So there must be some sort of happy
Well, it's
medium.
all based on the winds, right? So the ice will come down. If we get the northeast wind will blow the ice in.
This northeast wind that we experienced the northeast wind going out of the gut the other day, and so we went out to do some cod fishing, and Larry and you just kept being like the northeast wind, and Grant and I are just taking it in the face, and that boat's like a maybe 18, 20-foot boat just slapping off of those
Larry,
waves.
right? Larry's like, oh, Larry, winds after coming around, right? Oh, we should have been out earlier. A lot of fish. Reagan had himself all torqued up about whether we were going to get fish or not, right? Fish is no good when the wind's this high always. So anyway, as soon as we dropped the lines down, of course, they were hitting fish on the way down, right?
Excellent.
It was great fishing, but I get, okay, so this northeast wind, though, is the wind that brings
the ice in. Right, and we'll get that, it feels like sometimes it never leaves, but, I mean, the wind... June, we get all that wind. We get the fog and rain and the ice, and I mean, we had ice this year right up till June. This was one of the worst years for ice.
Okay.
In terms of isolation and ferries not running, boats not running.
Right.
But then, in parts of Labrador, if you don't get ice, they can't get over to traditional fishing grounds and hunting grounds, right?
Because they cross the ice for that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need some of it. Yeah, that's a really interesting component. Also, to see ice for sale. Because I thought that was a joke, But then I also have my interest in wild foods. I also have this interest in wild water, and the idea of people using that iceberg ice was very cool to me. So I'm still not 100% like this is for real. That's iceberg ice.
It's not like a gimmicky thing.
No, definitely, because
it's really. I've been like, is she
ice.
Albert was offering me beer brewed from iceberg water.
That is definitely, that's the real thing. Yeah. It's a beautiful beer, though. A million-year-old ice.
So it's cool that it gets used as well. I imagine it was used a lot more in the past, probably.
Oh, yeah,
people use it for ice houses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, God, yes. Now once the icebergs break up, and they always do, you get the boys out in the boats harvesting the ice, right? And it's mostly used
chainsaws, or are they just chipping it out? Or?
No, like when the ice breaks up. And you can just scoop it up along the side of your boat with nets, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
And
just
so it's a big thing.
haul it.
Come over, have a drink now and get a bit of iceberg ice. It's
that's really cool.
It's certainly novel, right? Don't get me wrong, but yeah. And yeah, those kids, one time they were selling cod tongues on the wharf, now they're selling ice.
And the seals, I guess I'll just say it because maybe not everybody listening would know, but I mean, seals are a marine mammal. They breathe air. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Are they using the sea ice as a hangout to sun themselves and to just take a break, or what are they doing up there?
When the seals come down on the ice, that's when they're pupping.
Oh,
that's
okay.
when they're having their babies, their pups.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and so
are they riding the ice down, or are they following along and because it's there and they can come up on top of it?
I don't.
I
That's
don't
something
know.
I haven't really considered before.
Like surfing it.
No, not surfing it. I wouldn't say. They just
They come-
migrate with.
They probably come, like you say, with the stuff you don't think about, right? But you're talking to the wrong person. You should be my pop's living room now, right? Because these are questions you're like, well,
Yeah.
how is it that I'm 40 and haven't yet come up with
This question.
what the seals are not, right? So, but you're probably chasing the bait fish down, right? They're probably also coming down when the codfish chase the capelin in.
Waters are warm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so then they pup, and they'll stay with their pups for, well, not very long actually, like maybe a month at most, month and a half.
And I know you guys aren't seal biologists, and I'm asking a lot of
No.
questions, but do you
Yeah,
know how
right.
many their litter is? Any idea?
I think
Just
you just
one.
have one.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Just have one.
All right, so do I go right into the hunt, or do I talk about some of the politics here? I want a little bit about the hunt. What is it? What happens in the spring? So describe this hunt, and you guys were telling me earlier about
The sealing boats, when the sealing boats would
Yeah,
come,
you were saying, yeah, exactly. So you were saying that obviously people have sealed for a long time, but this early on was one of the first ways they had access to cash from outside, right? Which must have been this tremendously desired resource.
Yeah, well, it was
sure. I mean,
worth
when
the
you're
risk.
Totally, but for the rest of the year, it was an economy of hunting and fishing and trading.
Right.
There was very little currency that you traded for anything, and I'll say that intentionally. Like, you would trade money for a thing, and that's probably how it was thought of. I mean, still, that really is what money is. You trade your money for a thing. But back then, it was like you traded vegetables for a thing, or you traded a service for a thing, or you traded for whatever it is that you needed, depending on what you both needed. And at that time of the year, then you had money to trade for whatever you wanted. So it kind of opened up a different, like, this would be a time when, say, candies would come into a community, then there would never have been candies before, because the boys would have gone out hunting, and they would have been in the larger centers with access to things that you would never get in the smaller communities.
So there's this time where not only cash, but all these outside resources start coming in. Yeah, it's typically hard to walk away from that when you look at cultures around the world. So that's that. The seal hunt was already taking place, but that probably increased it or industrialized it a little bit.
Industrialize it. Yeah. That's when the industrial sealing boats came in, and hundreds of men went to the ice. They'd say, right, but most of the sealing that is done around here now is
Small scale,
small boat fishermen.
Right.
With sealing licenses, and they're mostly taken for the pelts now.
Okay, I want to. All right, so part of what I think is going on in the States, I have this interest in the whales, and I just wish that there could be a regulated whale hunt in the way that we have a regulated hunt for so many other mammals.
Absolutely,
but we can't be right now because the emotional impact of the industrial whaling has reverberated so much through our culture that it's like still you can't approach the conversation because of what happened when it was industrialized. Did that happen here, or has that never been? Was it ever too exploitive at that time, or was there just not enough of it to make an impact on the seals at that time? Because I know now it's different, and the numbers of seals must be really high right now, I'd assume.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, we just got back from filming a new episode of the WildFed TV show on the East Branch of the Delaware River. We spent 2 days walking back and forth from shore out to the center of a mysterious eel weir. The rushing water was shallow, only knee-deep, but the cobbles on the bottom, combined with sudden deep pockets, made us thankful we had our Earth Runners on. Earth Runners are electrically grounded sandals made in the ancient Huarache design. You may have read about this ancestral sandal type in the best-selling book Born to Run, which looks at the indigenous use of this original human shoe technology. Earthrunner Huaraches are just like the ones our ancestors used to move freely across the landscape, except they've been updated with modern materials like Vibram soles and electrically conductive laces that keep you grounded. What I like most about them is that they stay on. Unlike flip-flops, which are constantly threatening to slip off your feet or your feet off the flip-flop. And my Earthrunner Alphas have a canvas footbed that gets even grippier when wet, so my feet stay put. So I love them for fishing, boating, or any other amphibious adventure. Earthrunners come in 3 models. All of them are 10% off with the coupon code WildFed. So if you're looking for stylish, minimalist footwear with a grounded advantage, check out earthrunners.com. Now, back to the show.
It's like 7.3 million.
Yeah, it's like plenty.
There's a lot more of them than there are of us.
Yeah, did they work that down though at some point when they were doing it industrially, or was it?
From what I understand, from my memory, now again, I'm not a subject matter expert, but from what I understand, I think the lowest that I've heard was maybe like 3-point-something million.
Okay, so still a strong population.
Still a strong population. I think when it was at its height, actually, you know what? I have no idea what those numbers are, so I can't even speak to it. But
you don't have culturally this idea that, we really screwed up and overdid it with the way we have that with the whales. I mean, because out of Nantucket and out of out of Massachusetts, basically, we just decimated whales, and then we went around the world and did that. And now our guilt keeps us from being able to have a whale hunt. Right?
It's not like that here, so it's not even thought about like that. So it's really hard. Even the question, like as you were framing the question, I was thinking, it's like a question I can't answer because I'm not in the time frame when like you can't imagine what people thought of it at the time,
right?
Except for the fact that it was an economy and they needed money, right? And there was no thought of it being not sustainable or that wasn't even didn't
not on the
even
table
because it was never wasteful.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and a lot of this industrial change then comes with waste. Right?
Because it's like this tunnel vision of what's the most valuable. And then, somebody will decide that that's worth exploiting and not do too much with the rest of it.
Before you know it, you're selling buffalo tongues and piling buffaloes 100 feet high, right?
Yeah, if they could breed cows with just tenderloins and pigs with just bellies, they would, right? They just grow them in little dishes or something. I don't know. But, we've become this society of these choice cuts of meat. And that, in my opinion, that's what's destroyed these. And that's what has changed the mindset too, right? Into that negative connotation of harvesting wild, right? Because you say it's often seen, you don't need to eat like that anymore, right? But wait a minute, what are we talking about here? We're also talking about why aren't we eating better? Why aren't we eating the foods from the place we come from?
Yeah.
Why am I shipping lamb in from New Zealand? You're in Newfoundland. Man, this is like country of lamb, right? From England and Ireland and, that kind of stuff. When you think about seal, well, why would I buy meat from somewhere else when there is plenty of it here?
That's having that meat too. We underplay the impact that the industrial food system has, because you'll get this pushback. Well, why would you do that? You can just buy this, and it's like, well, that also has serious repercussions too. But we're not talking about those because we everybody's on that system, right? Right,
but you're talking about on an island in the middle of North Atlantic. Yeah. Do you know how much it costs us to do stuff like recycling? Yeah. How much it costs us to bring in, how much environmental impact it costs us to ship to a place. Every single thing that comes here has got to come on one of them OceanX vessels.
Totally. Yeah. And so like the Magnuson-Stevenson Act that you're referencing from the 70s, designed to save the whales, and how much does shipping impact whales?
I was going to say just now, all that shipping to bring stuff in here. Right. You have right whales up here?
And there's been their population is the populations are hurting because they keep getting hit by boats.
Yeah, they're just this year they just found another 2 dead in the Gulf, so it's up to like 8. Yeah, it's 8. It's up to 8.
And this is a pretty threatened species at present.
They're down to like 150 or something.
My goodness.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like a prehistoric creature going extinct.
So let's talk about saving the whales. So let's also talk about keeping things more local so that we don't have to do that.
Unfortunately, it's such a nuanced conversation. Yeah. So what you have are people who resort to the emotional argument very quickly, right? So when did that part start? That there was this started to be resistance against the seal hunt. Do you know how?
It was never here. It's still not here.
Okay,
but for you could speak better to that.
You were saying in the 70s. Is that at the point where was it all marine mammals at that point?
Well, the Magnuson-Stevenson Act again was, from what I understand, the purpose of it was to help protect whales, but then they just sort of gave a blanket statement and said all marine mammals.
Right.
As a again, it was all about the whales, but the blanket statement said that there was no sort of no differentiation between marine mammals and just protect them all. And I feel like after that, it was a bit of a Disneyfication of animals. And so there was like this weird sort of separation where you didn't have to think about where your food came from, and then it became more industrialized. You didn't have to think about where your food came from. You didn't have to deal with the ugly side of the food system. So you could just open up a can, you could open up a package.
And you got people
something.
who didn't grow up seeing things,
dead,
seeing blood, seeing intestines, seeing killing.
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention, I think at that time too, you know, there's this transition away from people seeing their family members being born and their family members dying. So you're not seeing human birth or death. You're not seeing animals dying
we've
anymore.
Completely
Everything's
disassociated
right.
ourselves.
And then you're growing up watching things like Bambi at that time where Disney and other companies are making cartoons to sort of predictively program kids away from hunting. There was a intentional movement away from that. So that's that Disneyfication you're talking about.
Bambi's a good example of that for sure.
Yeah, it was one of the early ones, right? But then it's gone on to this anthropomorphication where every animal sings and talks and dances and snuggles you and shows you magic,
right?
Or whatever, right? So it's kind of understandable how some of this got here. But I can come up here. Let's say I can come up to Canada, I should say, and I could book a polar bear hunt. But I can't bring anything back with me, right?
No.
Or here we are in your shop and you've got all this lovely stuff and I can't bring it back with me, right?
No.
It's against the law for me to have any marine mammal parts come back into the States. And so, you know, Lori's thought out some seal and I've wanted to try seal for some time. So today, you know, I'm looking in your workshop there at this seal and just thinking like, oh, this is really exciting. And I could not do that at home. It's against the law. I mean, down in the States, we pride ourselves on our freedom.
Right.
You know? But we can't, you know, there's certain areas where we don't have it. But so the sort of anti-sealing campaign kind of seems like it comes on the heels of the anti-whaling campaign. Would you say that's fair?
I would say so, yeah.
And then there's this, we were talking earlier about the sort of billboards with the crying baby seal on it, right? And how that generates tremendous amount of revenue for some of the animal rights groups that fight this stuff. Because
they're exploiting people's emotions.
And getting paid for it, though, right? They collect a lot of money.
You just could chase the money, right? Chase where the money comes from.
So going against seals has been a lucrative thing.
Big business.
Yeah, and those organizations, which I assume those people to have, like if I try to frame my worldview through their eyes, I can see how if you believe what they believe, then fighting this stuff is the right thing to do.
Well, I can understand that too, to a certain extent. Like if I was driving down the road with somebody who was anti-sealing, and we were driving down and we saw a kitten on the side of the road, and it seemed to be in distress, both of us together would go, oh my God, we need to help that kitten. Like we are on the same page.
Right.
We just don't agree about this one particular thing. Like our method to get to protection is different. Whereas they're like, no, you can't do any of it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do this one little thing because in a grander scale, it helps something way bigger. And I'm okay with that. And I'm all right with pushing back and having this conversation with people.
But did you, I mean, at what point did you realize that you were having this conversation, you were going to have this conversation? Because when you started working with seal, this sounds to me from what you were saying that this felt like a heritage thing and a cultural thing, and there was this local component to it and sustainability and all of these factors. It wasn't maybe that you wanted to enter into this contentious debate so much, right?
No.
You seemed like a very mild-mannered person, not like the kind of person who's going to go looking for war.
No, I'm not a scrapper, although I will say don't cross me.
She's from Belle Island, mind you. But just for, one note, I don't think either of us would have thought we even needed to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like,
no, not until the conversation came to us, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a conscious, I'm going to serve seal because I'm like interested in having a row, right? Or I'm interested in making a point. I'm interested in pushing those views and getting those questions and putting it out on the table.
No, we were interested in heritage, and we were interested in local, and we were interested in like the preservation of the living memory, like we talked about. Like we're in a really interesting period, I feel like, where heritage and those types of skills have an immediately place at the table along with contemporary context, because we can sit here in my basement with these headsets on and you're going to record everything and take it and put it in a podcast, and it's going to go to the rest of the world. You know, we can sit with our tablets and our iPhones and have access to whatever type of information from anywhere on the planet. But we can also sit here and we can talk about seals and sealing, and we can talk about bark tanning leather, and we can talk about how to cure meat, and we can talk about foraging, and we can talk about things that are... So I feel like here in Newfoundland, we're in a really interesting place where both of those worlds are colliding, and there are people who know and understand both of those worlds to make it happen and work together. But yeah, with the anti-sealing crowd, it was really wild to come into that for the first time, because when I started working with seal fur, it was as part of a project for a program I was working in. I was going to school to learn textiles, and we had to do this project based on the works of Sir Wilfrid Grenfell. And so he was a doctor who was on the Northern Peninsula and up in Labrador, and anyway, had a magnificent impact on the people in that area. And so he did this handiworks program, which was like occupational therapy. And so he would do weaving, he would do knitting, they would do rug hooking, and like the Grenfell handiworks are still well known all over the world. Really well done. And so I was doing this project based on him. So I wove this baby bunting bag, and I wanted to put sealskin on it.
Can you describe a bunting bag for people?
Oh, sorry, it's a baby sack. And
kind of no like leg holes, right?
No
it's like
leg holes. It's like just this little sack.
sleeping bag.
Yeah, and it has a hood, and the one I made had little arms on it, and also had like the little slot in it so you could put it in the car seat.
Oh yeah.
And have your 5-point harness. So again, traditional meets contemporary. Yeah. Right. So I did this thing, and I wanted to put sealskin around the mitts and around the hood of it, because in a lot of images of Sir Wilfrid Grenfell at the time, he wore sealskin boots, he had a sealskin jacket, but it was very relevant for the weather and the temperature for where he was. It wasn't a fashion statement as such.
Right.
So I did this thing and presented it to the world, and it was very well received. But then when it went online, there was some pushback with it. And it was probably the first time that I had received the pushback. I think from a distance, I knew it was always out there.
How long ago are we talking about?
Not that long ago, like maybe 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
So not that long.
Okay. So it's right when you first start working with seal, this happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I got the comments, and it was like, comments of, oh, you're a horrible person and whatever. And I was like, it's a bit odd.
Bit strong.
Yeah. Like,
you haven't met me. That seems a bit harsh.
Listen, I just weave. That's what I do.
I made this for babies.
Right? Oh, babies! Remember, babies. Yeah.
And yeah, so it started happening then. And then when I would go to when I would do pop-ups, I used to have a studio space down at the plantation in Kitty Vitty. And it was in that space where I really felt the pushback, because people would go there from all over the world.
Yeah, tourists coming in.
Right.
But the pushback is always from off of Newfoundland?
Always.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's my point. It don't exist here.
There's no groups here that...
There's a small group.
Small little group.
What was it like for you emotionally when that first started happening? Like,
Well, it was really off-putting, because like you say, I mean, I don't naturally go to that place where I'm on the attack.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind having a hard conversation with somebody, but I rarely start from a position where I'm on the attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was hard. But, I kind of came around, and I was like, and I did more research and, talked to some people that I know in DFO, which is Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and people who are involved in the industry. And then I started doing my research about why it was so important here, and what some of the history was, and what some of the scientific things are, and that kind of thing. And so I came to a place where I was okay with it. Mm-hmm. Like I know what's happening.
You immediately dig your heels in, then, really. I
stood firm for sure.
But you took a look around to kind of see if what you were doing made sense, or if it.
But I still had no intention of stopping.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I had an innate sense that it was okay.
Yeah.
Because, my parents were okay, my grandparents were okay with it. And who are these people to come from away and tell me that what I was doing and what everything my parents and my grandparents were doing was wrong?
It's so presumptuous, like the idea that you take something with so much history and you just go like, no, we're scrapping that today. Yeah. Something I've teased vegans about is that, like, I was a vegan for about 10 years, so I have I come to hunting and fishing from a really different perspective. It gives me the ability to understand the mindset. Which is like a radicalist mindset, but it is just like a radical mindset. Yeah. And I say radical as in contrast to heritage, right? Yeah. It's like they're opposite things in a way. With vegans, you have this diet that has never existed on the planet. Mm-hmm. And we know that human beings are hunter-gatherers by nature. That's our sort of natural diet, right? Mm-hmm. There's never been a population anywhere that's done this. The closest thing would be we have a vegetarian cultural thing going on in India for a long time, but they are dairy consumers, which is like a liquid meat. But we have no vegans anywhere, no tribes, no traditional peoples, no modern peoples, no countries where people eat vegan diets. So it's essentially an experiment. And you have no one who's done it multi-generationally and then had like to say that we should do this, you would need people who are vegan to live their whole life vegan, have kids that were vegan. You need to go like 3 to 5 generations before you could even say it was safe. But the vegan mindset is no, the whole world needs to adopt this right now or you are evil. And it's like, whoa, we haven't even run this thing through the test yet.
Right.
Like you can't, you're asking everybody to do an experiment with our human health that could have tremendous repercussions. So it's not tested. So in other words, I'm just trying to say it's so presumptuous to tell you to stop doing something that here you are in this, like you're this sliver in time space, and behind you is all the people who've done this.
For thousands of years, humans have existed by living off the land. Right?
Yeah, and we know that they were healthier. And you were sort of touching on this earlier, Lori, that all of the press now is that we need to move in that direction again for our health. We know that we need to be outside. We know that we need to eat organic. We know we need local food. And then there's all the ecological issues of the footprint it makes to ship everything all over the place. So we know we need to go back to that too. So it's like a cognitive dissonance that people will hold where they believe that in one end, we need to eat this cleaner, healthier, more local diet. And on the other end, when you put it in front of them, they go, no way, I would never do that.
Well, it's such a shock to what they believe. They're like, oh my God, now everything I believe is wrong. And it's like there's this internal struggle about how do I reconcile how I feel right now? So I feel like part of it, and this is a bit of a diatribe, but I feel like part of it is emotional health and emotional literacy. Yeah. Like people just don't know how to feel about it. And they don't know how to sort of, they just don't know how to process it. Like there's a lack of critical thought to figure out how they feel about it and to be okay with it.
But most radical thinkers are not interested in critical thought process. No. That for anything that would go against what they just want to believe. And that's when there's no conversation to be had.
But they believe in a guru because that diet doesn't come from, and I don't really have anything against vegans. I honestly really don't.
No, me neither.
You know what I mean? But
radical aggressive vegans, I have something against. I mean, I don't mind if somebody wants to eat that way, but when they start going out,
radical aggression towards anything.
Especially if they start spray painting your coat or something like that, it's like, okay, now I have a problem.
But it comes from a higher source from them, because I feel like none of those people who are doing those things just started off on their own.
Yeah, that's like a religion, I think, a cult kind of. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm wondering. And I'm not religious, and I certainly I don't believe or follow in religion, but I kind of wonder if people are lacking that a sort of moral code that they can be okay with.
Yeah. Well, you guys also have here. There's such a strong heritage. I mean, even in Maine, which for most of the people in the States consider, we would be like the Newfoundland of the States in a way. We're considered like this really, I guess Alaska would be maybe more equivalent, but we're considered this like really remote northern place. But it's so urbanized now, all these ideas have filtered in, and so much change has happened, and so many people from away have moved in, and so many people from there have moved away, that there isn't this sense of heritage that we can trace back to the land very much. Whereas here, like you were saying, you're in this interesting position where the modern contemporary world is here, but the people here have a strong sense of who they are and the heritage, which makes you a lot more unassailable from the outside. And it also, with these kind of ideas, with radical ideas, but it also, I would imagine it makes it harder, you'd be less susceptible to that kind of
Well, it's harder for them to get here too.
Yeah.
It's not like they can just, walk across the border. And
they get so cold too.
Right.
Sorry.
They can't.
I should stop picking on vegans.
Yeah, no, and I get it. But, we would have, it's just such a natural process to eat like that because you can. And we've talked about this idea of privilege and eat, and what it is that you eat. And then back to the vegan thing, like you have to be privileged to be able to afford that food at this point. Like,
it's an elitist diet.
It's an elitist diet, right? And it's a very highly processed diet, and it just comes back to radical extremists of anything I'm not interested in, right? Like, that's great. You do say your things, eat how you want, but this to me makes sense in my environment, in the place that I'm from, and culturally, it's acceptable. This is where I was born, and this is where I was born into this.
Yeah.
So this is not a privilege for me to eat like this.
And people struggle sometimes too from that mindset to understand that you can love and appreciate a species that you eat or that you work with.
Yeah,
I mean,
an incredible respect for them.
Yeah.
I bet.
Like every time I'm working with a pelt, I'll take a minute and I'll sit and I'll say, you know what, thank you for being here, and just like I'll just think about what it is.
Yeah, this pelt was a
living, breathing
swimming
creature, and I
yeah.
appreciate that life, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, my experience is that people who hunt, even people who are more on the sort of the side of hunting, there's the side that can be kind of distasteful down where I live, you know. There's a side to it. There's a lot more movement towards, you know, the food side of it now. But even there, I find that people, it's hard because people who don't hunt see photos after a hunt, and it leaves such a different impression.
It's out of context.
Because I'll see a guy shoot at something, and I'll see a tear in his eye.
Yeah.
But I don't see that tear in his eye when he's doing his photo, because it's been a few minutes and everybody's
Right.
hugging and laughing and talking, and they're so
Yeah.
excited after the success. And then people see that, and it looks like gloating.
Yeah.
When it's like, that's not what it is at all, right?
No.
Right.
And they don't see that, like, people who...
It's the emotional release.
Yeah, it's a huge emotional release, absolutely.
We haven't come far enough away from it that we're going back to it here. Like we've never... We're only those couple of generations of people who live so close to the land, so we haven't gone far enough away from it that we have to make this conscious decision to let's go back to that way.
Right. Yeah, it's still close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Describe the seal hunt in its current form. What does it look like, or what's you say it's in the spring of the year? What happens?
Well, there's large sealing vessels that'll go out, like
How big?
well, just like crab trawlers and stuff. That's mostly what's
Yeah.
doing it now. Not like trawling vessels,
No.
but I mean, what, 50, 60 foot?
Okay.
Maybe at the biggest.
Yeah, at the biggest.
Big crew?
Big crew, 5, 6 crew
Okay.
aboard,
Yeah.
maybe. And then there's a small inshore fishermen who will still do it. Take their small 18-foot boat and go
Really?
out on the edges of the ice.
So how far do you got to go off from the shoreline to be at the ice?
Like the ice comes onshore. So you could
okay.
walk out on the ice and shoot from
I
land.
want to see that so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
But I mean, some guys will take the boat out if it's just sort of like skirting around, like if it's
it
outside
could be
the
a couple of
bays.
kilometers off or something
Right.
often,
So
right?
you'll have seals in close then. At
Oh
that
yeah.
time.
Well, they'll come in. They'll be on the rocks, and then they'll be on the beaches. But I mean, you're not just standing up on the beach and shooting from the beach. You're getting in your boat. You're going out. The ice flow is a couple kilometers out or whatever, and you're hunting from the boat.
Rifle hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what are how is it regulated, and like how many seals is there a quota or?
I don't know.
There
I
is
don't
a
know
quota.
the quotas.
It's the most highly regulated hunt in the world, I would say. And so there are a lot of people invested with DFO, and so DFO will have a team of veterinarians, they'll have hunters, they'll have any number of people who are invested, the processors, all that kind of thing.
all the stakeholders.
All the stakeholders. So every year there'll be some review of between like the hunters and the regulator, DFO, and also the veterinarian to make sure that the kills are as clean as possible. One from an animal welfare perspective, but then it's also a quality perspective. Because if you hunt yourself. If the kill is not clean, then there's a certain wastage that's going to happen. And so all of those stakeholders will have input on that, and then sort of we work accordingly. So now it's a 3-step process where there's a shot with a high-powered rifle, a shot, and then the hunter has to go up to it and give it a smack on the head.
Okay, this is the part that people really get all
Right.
bent out of shape about.
Right.
How do you
This
kill
seems
fish, Daniel?
Same way, just knock them.
Right.
Right? It
'Cause
seems
it's instant.
really normal to me.
Right.
I don't see this as being shocking,
No.
especially after a bullet.
Right. It's that after a bullet. Making sure.
You're being humane. You're saying I want to
Totally.
make sure this animal's like unconscious if
Yeah.
it's still got
Absolutely.
vital signs.
Totally. And then it's the arteries are underneath the flippers, I think.
Oh, so they immediately bleed them out.
Yeah. Immediately bleed them out, which is where you get these images from the anti-sealing groups, because
Yeah.
they'll fly over and they'll capture these images, and it's a really sharp contrast of red on white. It's
Red on white,
really
yeah.
impactful. And those are the images they get. And so the boys
Yeah,
will
but
have...
see, look at a slaughterhouse image. I mean, it's pretty impactful
it's all
too.
It's
Right?
all covered in, all hidden.
Yeah, it's all
right?
hidden. Yeah, exactly.
But here, I mean, you can get a moose hunting license or a bear license without ever shooting a rifle. It's like you have to do a whole course to be able to, like, it's a 2-3 day course to go and get your sealing license. And not everyone can just go and get a sealing license anymore.
It
You
strikes
said
me.
it happens like once a year, that course?
Yep.
And there has to be a space open for you. And once you get your license, I think there's still a couple of years where you have to work under somebody in order to become a full-fledged sealer.
Okay.
Like it's highly
And
regulated.
nobody can come from if you're not from here, you can't come.
Yeah.
You're not even allowed out on a boat
Oh,
unless
really?
you get an
Yeah.
observer's license.
And the permitting is
Even if you are a resident, you still need an observer's license.
I wouldn't be able to go out.
I can't. We can't go out on a hunt.
How do you go about getting an observer's license?
You have to go and do the course.
Yeah.
Right?
And then
Dang it.
apply. And then apply for something. So like if you guys are ever thinking about it in the future, you might want to start looking
now. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we should do that. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that later today. It strikes me that this is a subsistence hunt more than anything because when I was planning to come, I was looking at the Newfoundland Labrador sort of hunting and fishing web page, and they're promoting really big the caribou hunt, the moose hunt, the bear hunt. A lot of promotion there, bringing in people from outside. Those are sport hunts, even though people might subsist on that meat. They sell those as sport. This is not. There's no like come to Newfoundland and hunt seals. Like this is a subsistence thing, I assume.
Well, you would never because the animal welfare groups have just taken it so far. The government is not going to play around with turning with any sort of concept of making this sport because they just don't want to deal with it, and I don't blame them.
And it's all of Canada's taken this hit, right? It's not just it's not just here. Like a lot of this, like it's so funny. Like down in the States, if you bring up Canada to like somebody who has not traveled much, there's only one of the few tropes that they will have about Canada is like clubbing seals. People make a joke about that. Oh, you're going
Baby
up there to
seals.
club. You're going to go club baby seals. You're right.
Yeah.
baby
Well, just recently it ended up on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
Again,
those kind of things.
and
I
I'm
guess
like-
it's like a cultural meme about
Right.
Canada.
I'm like so sick of it. Like, can you get over it? Move on. Go find. But they can't because you follow the money trail.
Yeah.
That's too much money.
Yeah, it's ironic because Canadians in the States are also considered to be almost excessively friendly
Right.
and excessively polite. Sorry.
Right.
Like very, compared to down south, and then it doesn't make sense. Like, oh, they're these really nice people, but they club baby seals. It's like hard for people to get their head around. But that makes sense, and so then they take those seals, bring them back, and so those bigger boats will go out and get, I'm sure, multiple seals. Right?
Oh
Yeah.
my.
What would a haul be like?
I don't know.
I don't
Hundreds.
know.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah. And you were differentiating some species, too, because these hides that I'm seeing around are,
Harp seal.
okay, and they are gray, sort of gray and silver scale with like black sort of
So dark
spots.
through the center and lighter around the side. And so that's camouflage. So dark looking down, light looking up.
Like so many marine animals.
Totally,
like
yeah.
a shark or something.
And then the spots and stuff. And then when they get to be like, maybe, I don't know the number exactly, so I'm not inclined to say. But like the old ones will have a harp shape on the back. Like, that harp you'll see on Can of Guinness? That's what the marking will be, and that's why they're called harp seal.
Where on their back? It's not a symmetrical shape.
No, it's like, do I have any of those little seals popping around? I'll show you in a little bit.
Okay. That's
But
really
it's that
interesting.
type of like shorter on one side,
So
longer
that's
on
why
the-
they're called that.
That's why they're called harp seals.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, Laura, you had told me a story about that some folks, was it in the north, that they didn't really consider a harp seal a food? Who were you talking about? Was it Inuit?
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
We were up in Ottawa doing the dinner. I had a great conversation with someone, and she had said to me that they don't eat harp seal up there. They only eat the ring seal. And then this girl I met and wanted to talk to her about, Neve, I wanted to talk to her about her culture and her connection to seal and seal meat and seal craft. She's Inuit from Iqaluit. And I had her over to the house, and I served her harp seal. I wanted to cook it for her, and she then reiterated that. She's like, yeah, we don't eat this.
So it's
And-
kind of like you were like, I'm going to serve you raccoon or something.
Right. It's a little bit like that. And then she said, we only usually eat it raw, right? We don't
Yeah, why
cook
are you
it.
going to cook that?
I know.
Oh,
Destroy it.
I really like, and something that Grant and I have been interested in exploring with the show is when there are, like, you can go a couple states over and a fish like the yellow perch is considered this incredible game fish everybody wants to eat. Come over to where we are and it's a trash species, and how there's food taboos that are regional that have no basis in any substance except that. And I also noticed that people just get in a way of doing something with a food, like the way they cut it, the way they cook it, and variation is kind of like sort of laughed at, like, well, why would you do it like that? This is how you do it right,
Right.
And
And
but then you go
we're-
somewhere else and it's done right a different way.
Yeah, and we're a lot like that here. Like, there's only one, right? When it comes to cooking, Dad won't eat half of what I cook because Dad would be like, "Oh my gosh, she got something strange wrong with that," Not eating that. Right? Because You know, at Dad's time, everything there was salt and pepper, and it was
cooked to death.
Cooked, everything was overcooked and well cooked. Like Dad won't eat, I'll serve up moose rare, and
we were just at last night. It was
Dad
like
wants it back in the oven.
Every moose that I've eaten, I've never drawn a moose tag, so all the moose I've eaten has been gifts from other people or shared with me, and almost always braised.
Yeah.
And we were talking last night because Grant was saying, we were talking about deer and how moose is the largest species of deer, and we eat so much venison rare. Why don't we ever get served up a piece of rare moose?
Or
and
like moose tartare.
Yeah, like what?
Okay, so here, I teach butchery courses, and I talk about this stuff all the time, and how we handle the meat and how important it is to change how we're putting it on our plates, right? So here, yes, you can go to some of the greatest restaurants in town and get rare moose. And so when I started getting involved in the hunt, I always wondered why is all the moose like in the oven for 4 hours? And it just came from, there was no need to break it out. It wasn't like they break down the moose, it goes to a butcher, it's frozen, it's all done on the bandsaw. It doesn't matter what cut it is, because it's just going to go in the oven, because that's the only way they needed to eat it, right? And it, when it came from just it not being important. So now when Jason started going on the hunt, and we had gotten together, I'd sent him up the Great Northern Peninsula with a list for the butcher. And that was caused just an interesting conversation, in that why does she want the tenderloins taken out, and she wants the backstrap taken out. She wants the all the legs 2-inch, like Ossobuco style. Yeah. I wanted, and this big long list. And then I started cooking it for his parents and my parents in ways that they'd never eaten it. And yeah, I'll serve moose tartare, and I'll do tenderloin backstrap rare, and but it was never eaten like that.
But it's good this way, though.
That was amazing.
Because I've never had it that way.
We'll tonight.
All right. I saw that tenderloin sitting out. I said, Grant, this is our chance. So back to seal, when you've cooked it and prepared it, like you were just saying, so traditionally for the indigenous, it was eaten raw.
Yeah.
I always hear this thing, I've never had it confirmed anthropologically for me or by any First Nations people, but the term Eskimo, which gets used less now, obviously we don't hear it as much, but that word originally means something along the lines of it's eaten raw, or they eat it raw, or something like that. So I don't know if that's true, but that's something
I
don't know. But there are still, to my knowledge, groups of people who identify as
self-identify
Eskimo.
as Eskimo. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now we're all like, oh, we're real careful to say that,
Right.
but they're traditionally also rendering those oils down, right? I mean, there's quite a bit of fat on that carcass you had. You could just see big, thick, oily bits. And as it was thawing, it reminded me, the closest thing I can think of is bears.
Bear, yeah. Black meat.
Yeah, well, the meat is darker than anything I've ever seen. And I have watched an obnoxious amount of seal cutting videos. I just am really interested in it, so I've watched, and every time I watch, I'm like, why is this meat so dark?
It's almost black.
Yeah, I've never seen anything quite like that.
Yeah.
So it's got like hints of maroonish kind of reds to it, but they're very overwhelmed by the dark, almost like you said, almost black quality of the meat. I can't think of really anything else.
When we serve it like a carpaccio style, we'll par-freeze it and slice it through on the meat slicer, and it's like paper thin, and then freeze it in between parchment paper. And so then when you serve it, you just whip up the parchment paper, and it's
peel it off like prosciutto would
right.
come from
It's
a butcher.
a disc, and then it gets laid on a plate, and then you can certainly see that color come through.
Oh, yeah.
When it's really
The dark
sliced
color,
really thin.
or the red
the
color.
maroon color.
Once you start to, so it becomes more translucent.
Yeah.
But how do you like to serve it?
It depends on what cut I got. So a loin, which are harder to get now all the time, the demand is just, there was never any demand for loins. Then, this chef world and food world started growing, and then there is, and now there is a demand for the loins. And the loins are taken off because of the fat on it. It all goes rancid so fast. So you really need to care for this meat, extreme care to it, because the minute it gets room temperature, you can almost smell it. The rancidity happens really fast. So If it's
That
a loin,
carcass that I'm looking at
Yep.
your place, I assume, has had a layer of blubber that has been taken off, correct?
Yep.
Yep. I mean, obviously, they can't be rolling around in the sea without any of that.
No, exactly. And
it's
that's like 4 inches. Sometimes.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, some of the stuff I've. Yeah.
Oh, my mouth starts watering when I think
No,
about
I
it.
know. You think of all the rendering. No, because I can't get it.
Oh, really?
No,
it's hard
so-
to come by.
Yeah, so even a loin I'll take and cook just to finish that. A loin I'll take and do it rare, or I'll do a carpaccio or something like that with it. And then the flippers are like any tough cut of shoulder. Everything is long and slow, and then it
Okay,
flakes
can we talk
apart.
about this flipper bit here?
Right.
You guys have mentioned it a few times, and I keep being like mental note. I want to come back to it. Now, anatomically, the bone structure would be similar to ours, different proportions, but I mean they have the same bone structure, right? Being mammals.
It's just only.
But is it like a chicken foot in that it's full of a lot of cartilage, or is it more like the shoulder of a deer? Like what is that?
I don't know, because you never get down into the phalanges, right? Of the
Yeah,
You,
but
you
when
never
you're
see
saying
that.
they're eating the flipper, do you mean the actual flipper part, or
No,
is it
I mean like
There's
the
the
shoulder?
shoulder.
Okay,
The
that's a
shoulder.
way of saying the shoulder.
Yeah,
Got
it is. Yeah, so they'll call it
Understood.
the flipper, but it's more the shoulder. And flippers are the only thing that really gets sold here. That is the traditional. The fish truck shows up and it's flippers. Now sometimes you can get people to hold on to the carcasses for you. There's just not much meat on them, and there's a lot of bone, and they're really tiny by the time you take all the meat off them. Nobody processes meat like that anymore.
So do they not take the loins off?
No.
Where do they go? Into the ocean.
Bored.
Oh.
So if you want cuts of meat, you pretty much have to be there on the wharf when the
When
ships
they
come in. Yeah.
Where does the oil go? Does that also just get dumped
Well,
over?
now it gets rendered down. There's a processing plant here that sells the fish oil, Carinos.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'll take the pelts. They will take some of the meat and some of the because the smaller operations, the smaller fish trucks, they want the shoulders. But Carino was doing the loins up to a certain point, so they do like vacuum packed, really do a good job of cleaning all the oil and fat off of them. But this year they didn't do any.
There's no market for it.
Why can you freeze pork with fat on and you can't do that with any game? Do you have any idea? You know what I'm talking
That's
about?
a
Like,
very
Yeah.
good question.
yeah, you get like bacon. You're like, oh, this is great. You do that with bear.
Now,
or
bacon
something.
is cured, though, right?
Okay, but even still, like you could have. Yeah, like can't you? You freeze
I would say
pork
it has
fat
something
on?
to do with the levels of the omegas in the.
Yeah, that's
in-
got to be what it is,
yeah.
right?
And
Wow.
why it goes rancid. So, like, Mom's got this whole process. She puts it in the sink. They put bread soda over it, or like baking soda over it. It shows up all the fat. It soaks there for like it could sit there for a couple of hours in the baking soda, and then it's also creates a grittiness, easier to pull every bit of fat off it. Like someone who, like the old people who clean flippers are meticulous about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they got to be vacuum packed, because if the air gets at them in the freezer, even they'll go
Wow.
off. So it takes an extreme level of desire on top of it,
Right.
like a whole lot of work.
Yeah.
You have to be dedicated to wanting to eat it like that, like outside of flippers.
Okay.
So traditionally, what was it, dried?
No, just cooked.
Just eaten with
Just
it.
right
Eaten
away.
raw,
Well,
yeah.
traditionally amongst indigenous,
Yeah,
so it's
'cause
like
it was
brought
raw.
in and eaten,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
okay.
And you can
Europeans-
freeze
Yeah.
things outside, obviously,
Right.
certain times a year. But also a lot of dipping things into those oils, right? Because that was the lipid source, I think, for on the landscape for a lot of people, right? Like I see a lot of,
And then it was also a fuel source.
yeah,
Like
okay,
it
that
burned-
candles and
the oil
Totally.
lamps,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
burns really
What
cleanly.
were you just talking about?
using the seal oil as a food for indigenous folks seems like that
Okay.
was one of the main uses
Okay.
of it. Yeah.
I'm familiar with it. With that, I never really heard.
Oh
of it.
yeah, like I see because a lot of fish, are low in
Yeah.
the fats that they would need to sustain through the winters and such. So
Right.
the seal oil, as I understand it, was pretty important for that. So all the hides though are coming off.
Mm-hmm.
And where do they go?
So they go to Carino Processing.
Okay,
And that's
so
out,
that's here on the island too.
that's out in Dildo.
All right, for listeners, I was
She's not being rude.
you pull out a map, and it's Dildo, Spread Eagle, and
Yes, it's right across
by-
from Spread Eagle.
Just next to Come by Chance.
Come by Chance. I keep asking people here, hey, are they ever going to change the name from Dildo? And people are like, no, why would you do that? It's like, all right, I'm sorry I asked. I keep it. It's fine with me. So in Dildo, they process
There's
these
a
hides.
Yeah.
processing plant. The only one here that so the only one here now.
Okay.
And so the local fishermen, if you go out and got a license and you get 5 or 6 seals or whatever, those will be then sold. You sell them to Carinos. You sell the pelts.
Okay.
And so they'll take from the bigger boats as well. So when the hides come off, they're left with the hide and the layer of oil, and Carino processes that as well.
Before we get down to sort of like what you're doing with the hides, what is the main market for these hides and pelts?
I'm not sure if it's the oil is more valuable or the hide is more valuable.
Oh, okay.
So,
I kind of think
The
it's the
fat
oil.
is on the hide.
Yeah, we call it the oil. But yeah, fat.
so there is a demand for the oil.
Oh, totally. It's
It
it's an incredible nutraceutical. I have some
Wow.
capsules upstairs. I'll show you before we leave.
Where?
Wait, the oil that's the same as rendering down the fat?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about
Okay.
the
Yeah.
like
the blubber, like
the
that.
lard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I just call it the oil.
Does it?
Yeah.
Does it like? With the more saturated a fat is, the more it will solidify at room temperature. So you get like a coconut oil or something, and it'll go hard at room temperature. But you got an olive oil, it will kind of gel up in the fridge. But if fish oil in the freezer stays liquid, like bear fat is like a gel at room temperature unless it gets real warm. What is the quality of the seal oil like? Do you know?
Oh my God, it's just completely
It must stay real liquidy.
super liquidy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I want to
and-
put it on my hands.
yeah, right. I mean, it's really hard to hold on to skin
Yeah.
and yeah.
Okay, so those hides have that adipose fat layer on them, and they're
Yeah.
processing it there.
Yeah.
But then, is it sold just inside Canada as a nutraceutical, or does it go?
Depends on the country. Some countries.
Yeah. Okay. So you got different.
Yeah.
Some countries ban it, some don't.
Right.
Because but the meat is considered like like fish under fishery law, so it can freely move inside of Canada.
Okay. Right. And then you get your hides from them.
Usually, yep.
Yeah. Okay. And talk about a little bit about your projects and what you're doing with it.
Oh my goodness, I do all kinds of stuff with it.
Yeah, I know. I'm seeing bits of it sort of everywhere
Yeah.
down here in different stages.
Well, when I really had to start talking to people about what it was that they thought of it versus what I thought of it, then I just, you know what, I'm going to push the boundaries on what people feel like this is, because a lot of people see it as a luxury item, and it's expensive for sure, but it's expensive because everybody who had a hand in it makes a living wage. And people are in conditions, whether it's in the processing plant or on the water, they're in conditions that they set for themselves, and so their own safety is kind of up to them. They're in charge of that, we'll say, and so it's expensive because everybody gets what they need out of it.
Is there anything you can think of that would give perspective on the price for people, like compared to, or?
Well, again, it's sort of.
I mean, the pelts here are about $120 a
Yeah.
pelt Canadian.
Between 120 and 150, depending on the quality.
That's what you pay.
That's what I pay.
Okay, so by the time you have put your work into it,
Right.
now you're talking about a finished good. Yeah, the price has got to be pretty high.
Well, yeah, if I was doing a shawl for somebody, a knitted shawl with a sealskin yoke, it's like somewhere between $220 to like $450, depending on what
Okay.
I've done with
But
it.
she also does the knitted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
You
going to say,
actually
yeah, but
knits
that's
it, yeah.
a finished fashion garment,
Yeah,
essentially,
For sure.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
But
so, I mean, I've
But obviously a
challenged-
lot cheaper for you to work with. There's other pelts that you can work
Right.
with that'd be considerably less expensive,
Yeah.
but don't have this sort of cultural heritage associated with them or this locality associated with them.
Exactly. Now, the rabbit that you see on that shawl over there, that's local rabbit. A friend of
Oh,
mine
cool.
who's a homesteader, those were her rabbits.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I did the piece for her and then a belt for her partner. And that's cow leather, but whatever. Under here, you see the resin pieces.
Mhm.
So those were the ice flows that I made. So they're all, the sealskin bits are captured in resin and then they were hung from the ceiling
Okay,
suspended.
so this is like an art installation.
was.
That's an art
Yeah.
installation. Yep.
Okay.
So I've dyed it, I've screen printed on it, I've shaved it out, I've done leather lace, any number of things. If I think of something new to try with it, I'll try it with it.
And I've seen too on your website like earrings and things like that. So stuff that must do well at like sort of in town and whatnot as well.
Fairly, yeah. Yeah.
And then I was really impressed with the quality of the leather today, Laura. You had that
Yeah, it's
leather
nice stuff.
hide in your.
Beautiful.
My goodness, thick and but supple.
Yeah.
But just a beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Even the
We've-
bark tan samples have a certain suppleness to it because it retains some of the oil because there's so much oil in it to start that I don't know if without like significant over processing, I don't know if you can ever get rid of it.
Wow. That's awesome. If we were going to backtrack a little bit, because we were telling your story and we kind of stopped after what happened when you got some pushback, but what happened for you after that? Sort of you saw that, okay, people are going to push back against this a little bit. And I always like the stories where sometimes people are like, it catalyzes something in somebody where it's like, oh, you're going to tell me no? Okay, well.
Well, it was
no.
something like that. I was like, you don't actually know what's happening
Yeah.
here, and who are you to judge me? You don't even know me.
So what happened? Where'd you go from there?
Well, again, I started doing a lot of research, and I started pushing the boundaries of what I was doing with it. And then just all those conversations. earlier this year, back in April, I really got noticed by the animal welfare groups. So they found me on Facebook, and I remember I was watching a movie with my little guy on a Sunday evening. And before I put him to bed, I just opened up Facebook, and I had all these messages, describing any number of ways that I needed to die. I was like, whoa, that's pretty intense. And so I closed it down, and I got up the next morning.
How'd you sleep that night?
Well, I was like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
And I just went on to bed. But the next morning when I woke up, it was like hundreds. And there was all kinds of complaints to Facebook, and then they shut down my page, and then locally people got a hold of the story. And then CBC wanted to talk to me, and then it made national news, and then I was talking to radio, and then it got really, really, really intense. And it was always...
Do you know who it was? Was it just
specifically?
No. In the sense of was it an organized campaign that the origins of, or
No.
did it come from some Facebook group that happened to find you and decide to release the Kraken on you? Or whatever?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't follow it back that far.
But Facebook shut your page down for a minute.
Facebook shut my page down, yeah.
And I was reading an article about this story you're telling me today. Maybe it was CBC that I was reading it on.
Could have been, yeah.
And there was a linked article about how Facebook had shut down multiple sites associated with either the seal hunt or with goods that come from seals, right? And then that they had repeatedly apologizing, saying it was an algorithm problem.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true? Or I can see that being true.
I totally think that's true immediately, because then when a real live person... Because I actually happen to have some family in the U.S. who are connected to Facebook. They work with Facebook.
Oh, you're lucky, because it's hard to get a hold of somebody there.
Exactly. And not that they were able to directly have an impact, but I got from them that, there was, at a certain point, there was a real person actually taking a look at it.
Okay. Who are your allies in all of this?
Well, I would say people like Lori, people like yourself.
Yeah, but I guess
Randoms around?
Yes, but I'm glad to know that we're random.
Well, like yourself and random.
Right. Thank you. Better. At the institutional level, or at the regulatory level, or are there tribal groups who
There
are
all those
allied
people.
in this? Yeah.
Yeah, there are all those
anybody
people.
that you can kind of comment on, or what their different stories or involvements are in it?
Like Carinos, they certainly...
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
They're
the
they
processing
would,
plants.
yeah, they would be one of the industry leaders.
Yeah.
There are the encapsulators. There are multiple groups, either up north or in and around the Magdalen Islands. There's a group on PEI. There's all sorts of groups all over the country. And they're starting to pop up more, because now seals are being a problem on the west coast of Canada, in and around BC. So it's getting more traction there.
That the seals are having ecological impact, you mean?
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Again, I'm not a subject matter expert there,
but
I know
we
they're
won't quote you on this.
Right, but I know that
if you're gonna throw a dart at it.
well, they're popping up in waterways where they were never before. Now they're in salmon rivers. They were never there before.
Eating salmon.
They're inland.
And there's not a hunt allowed there. Is that right?
No.
No. There's and we were talking about earlier, all the seals that came on land in that community. And
Can you talk just because people have context for what you're telling?
Yeah, so there was a story all over the news the winter how this town got inundated with seals. The ice came in, the seals just went from the ice
out here.
Yeah, in Newfoundland. Yeah, the seals just went from the ice onto the land, because the land was full of snow and ice. And all of a sudden, people driving cars, and they're stopping, waiting for the seal to cross. And there was...
I would have loved to see that.
Right. There was...
They're not exactly that nimble on land,
and there was
are they?
40, 50 people, seals in the community. Right? They came up the river. You've never heard of that before, right?
Well, and now that's an invasive species. They're not supposed to be there.
Right.
They're not supposed to be there, no. And then, when you hear about the, how much fish they eat, and how much fish they take... 50% of the cod stocks are now eaten by seals. 50%, right?
And this is a place where that's a particularly delicate subject,
It
right?
is.
Cod
Yeah.
is, and that's a topic for another conversation. But cod here being an incredibly important part of the economy and of the subsistence and of the life way and everything of this place. Yeah. So I know our lobstermen, for instance, down where we are, where that's a good 5% of our economy and very big important industry in Maine. And now that cod is off our menu, we can't harvest cod there. Now the lobstermen starting to hate the cod. They used to be part of their, that was a fishery they participated in. But now occasionally they'll find the cod in their traps, and boy, it's it's the cod's eating all the lobster,
Yeah.
So sometimes when I hear about an animal is the sort of bane of a fishery, I'm always like a little skeptical. But when you're talking about an animal that had been sort of more controlled in a sense by the take, and then there starts to be less pressure on them, and then they start to become incredibly abundant, and then you start to see the impacts that they have. If you're harvesting from all these other species and you're not harvesting them, then all of a sudden, right, they're starting to eat their way through things.
Yeah. And you'll see pictures, people will post and, they'll have their seal and open up the belly, and it's any number of different things, and it'll be full of capelin, or it'll be full of crab, or it'll be full of something that we're concerned about.
Yeah.
Like a fish species or a shellfish species that we're concerned about. And it's like, well, this is part of the problem. So collectively, what are we going to do about it?
Here, do you feel like there's enough seal being taken, or should it be increased?
I don't think there's enough seal being taken.
Oh, that's really cool.
No, and talk to the fishermen, like if you were asked them to name the top 3 problems with the seal fishery or the cod fishery, it's seal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, seal will be up there at the top of it.
Yeah.
But if we're going to take it, we have to do something with it.
Right.
And I don't feel like there's enough being done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people like Lori should be supported more to make it easier for, like, the regular people. Like, I don't cook a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So I would need some support to know what to do with it, to make it palatable to put on my plate. And then I would do it more often. Because if I'm going at it, it's going to be like a hockey puck by the time I'm finished.
We can't access it. Even, like you said, we can't even get the loins at the processing plant.
Well, exactly.
They're not processing loins because no demand for loins. Mm-hmm. Right? But if we can get it in the top restaurants, then people are going to order it, because then it's like, well, it must be great if it's in a top restaurant.
Yeah.
Right?
But even in local grocery stores, like maybe you can find it at Coleman's every now and then, which is a local grocery store. But
there's times where you'll find seal in the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I want to point out one of the interesting things about Newfoundland is that you can have game meat in your restaurants and stores, right? Like moose, for instance, which is, so foreign to me, because you just can't have anything like that. There can be no monetary exchange for wild game in the States.
Why don't you see it in the supermarkets more, the grocery store more?
Well, the bigger chains is because their head offices are outside of Newfoundland, and so if they have it in their if they have it in their stores, then there's going to be a negative pushback.
Yeah.
Would people buy it if it was there?
I would say so. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, yes, but not in any quantity. Not like they're going to buy the chicken that's on sale.
It's not worth it to them to get into the fight, probably.
So do you think there should be less regulation on the hunt, and more people should be able to do it more easily?
No,
I don't think there should be less regulation.
No, I'm happy with how it's regulated. I'm glad it's highly regulated. In order to purchase game for your restaurant, you have to have a purchasing license. The hunter has to have a selling license. The tags have to be recorded. You have to keep the tags. You have to, prove that every piece of meat. No, it's not. No, and that's all right.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I'm happy for it to be like that, to protect the species. But yeah, we're the only province in Canada that can legally sell wild game. But this comes back to the paying attention to it and continuing to put it on our plates so that we are paying attention to it, and the changes and the regulations and policies that are getting made.
What's Canada, and what's in particular the province's position on it? Are they? It's obviously they're supportive, or it wouldn't exist. But are they wanting to kind of stay out of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
From a national perspective, because it gets in the way, like the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. They don't really want to have anything to do with it because it gets tangly when they're trying to make other deals.
And right now it's kind of under the radar. It's not causing enough attention that they need to pay attention to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So as long as everything just kind of stays on a simmer there.
Right. Yeah, and it's always something that's present to me because I can go into a restaurant and get it. And therefore, the moment that someone tells me I can't do that, then I'm going to have a problem. Yeah. Right? But you want to have, we need insight and foresight to that before it gets to that point. Right?
What are the properties of the hide and leather? Like when what would you, we're at that place where it becomes like a luxury instead of a need, in the sense that, there's traditionally how seal was worn and why it was worn.
Well, the fur is directional. So when I apply it to a garment, I make sure that the fur does have a certain direction to it because our weather is wet and it's, a bit colder. And so it'll wick moisture away.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. It is warmer, but you definitely want a nice liner underneath, like, say, a jacket or a pair of mitts or something. It can handle being wet. It can handle cold, obviously. Like most leather and fur, it doesn't really like to be hot. So I keep it away from, like, my wood stove and the furnace and stuff. It doesn't hold moisture. It doesn't hold scent, I should say.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I have a bolster pillow upstairs that I got when my little guy was born. And so I would nurse him on it, and then the dog would lie on it, and the cat would mash her face into it. And it looks just as good now as it ever did, and that was 7 years ago. But it's certainly not for lack of, being around the house. Like, people sit on it, people lie on it, and it does all manner of things, but it still looks and smells the same way it did when it first came in the house. It's incredibly durable. I feel like a lot of people look at fur and they think of something very delicate. And yeah, I mean, you certainly need to be able to handle it a particular way, but it's not delicate. Like, it can handle wearing.
Yeah, we put them on pockets in some of the aprons that Mom made for the restaurants downtown. And, often a restaurant apron gets washed. It just goes in the washer, goes in the dryer.
Right.
It gets fluffier, but that's about it.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
If Canada came and said, here's, Claire, we're giving you $5 million and unlimited access to pelts, like, what would be your sort of dream to do with this? And how would you see it in use, I guess, if you could get it out to people in a bigger way? Like, where does it fit in? Like, where would it fit into people's lives?
See, I don't know if I'd make a specific thing.
Yeah, you look like you got a lot of little projects going on here.
I like to explore, so I would have a team and we would explore,
Yeah.
and we would see how far we could push it and what it could handle.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're like in a way that some restaurants are sort of. I picture a restaurant like Noma that experiments, and then all this culture trickles down from those experiments. So you're sort of pushing boundaries right now.
I'd be the R&D.
And you'd like to see so if there was a trickle down that came out of your offices into other houses that were going to be producing more mass-produced garments, like, where would you see it fit?
See, I don't even know if I'd go mass-produce, because I like to actually teach people.
Yeah.
Like, so often somebody will reach out to me and say, I want to be able to do this little thing. Maybe it's like an accent for something for their kid. And can I have a couple of bits? And I'm sure, well, here, I'll be at this market, come and have a couple of little bits. Sometimes if they want a significant piece, then I'll, just charge them for it because it costs me something. And then I'll ask them, well, have you worked with this before? And they'll say either yes or no. Most often it's no. Well, do you know what a Glover needle is? Do you have any artificial sinew? Do you know what, A, B, C, or D is? Have you ever tried to put a needle through this before? If you haven't, then let's talk about what you can do. And so maybe it's a hammer and a nail so they can poke their holes first before they sew into it. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I like to show people and teach people what it is that they're working with.
Yeah. What's it mean for you?
For me, it's a nod to history and tradition. Like, I don't ever want that stuff to go away. And if I can have a part in making sure that it stays, then that's what my part will be. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be, like, one of those people in the industry that everybody knows. And I really don't care if I am. I want it to stay. I want to be one of those people in the background that just keeps driving it.
Like, if you guys were each going to give your, you got like a couple minutes to address the world about this topic, like how do you tie a bow on it? What do you want to say about it? I'll start with you, Lori. Like, what do you want to say about seals to people who this is the first time they're even hearing? Like, this hasn't been on a lot of people's radar, so they're hearing it for the first time, and then, what do you want to say to them?
Just give me a second. I'll just whip that right out of me.
No, I'm so happy you're going first.
You have to stop making it a cute, cuddly animal for everyone that eats meat. It is a sustainable hunt. It is a very regulated hunt. It is a delicious product. I wish more people here ate it. I wish we had that demand that it would then be in the supermarkets and easy for everyone to access. That's the educational piece. Like when Claire talks about the educational piece, that's why I do what I do. I want you to understand how to cook it. I want you to understand how to eat it and consume it and feed it to your children and continue to pass on that story, that heritage, that culture to your family. There is no need of it to come off our plates in the numbers and the quantities that are out there. But if we don't start eating it, it will be lost. That the idea that we can go and eat that, the same with the game in general. And it's important for you to know that it's past and how hard people fought for it to be on your plate today. Just because that matters to me, and I want it to matter to you, and I want I want to be able to serve it to you in ways that you've never eaten it before, and then I want to tell you about how you can also eat it. And, you know, the idea of the workshops and stuff I teach, that's the reason that I do that, is to be able to pass that knowledge on, to be able to pass on what I'm learning. I mean, I'm no expert, like everyone, we learn from other people, and the more people you talk to, the more I learn from all the time. And just to continue to keep it on our plate is like super important. It's like, is why I do what I do when it comes. That's why when I take people out, it is all about serving them food from here. Like, I want you to taste what this tastes like, and this is how Mom served it, and this is how you can pay $120 for you know, a meal at some of the best restaurants that are serving this stuff. But yeah, it needs to be more accessible, and we all need to work harder to make them more accessible.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Claire?
Oh, that's hard to follow.
Lori's hard to follow. Just got to keep up.
Seals and sailing is relevant and important to me because our heritage and our space in time right now is important to me. And right now, seals and sailing is in both of those spaces. So it's myself learning from that skipper up on the Northern Peninsula about bark tanning, and him looking at me and saying, I can't believe you actually want to know this. Nobody around here wants to know this. And I'm saying, yes, what you know and what your skill set is, what your information is important, and it's relevant, and it will continue to be relevant. And then maybe I get to share that with somebody down the road. Hopefully I never get to a point where I don't think anybody wants to know it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I hope it continues to be relevant and important to somebody. And I like to share self-sufficiency. So if I can show you how to repair a patch in your jacket, if I can show you how to make your sweater more warm, or if I can show you how to help yourself, then that's incredibly relevant and important to me. And so working with this material helps me do that with a lot of people. It helps me to gain skills that are relevant, important to my family, so that I can help them and that I can be the best provider or mother to my family. I don't know, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in it. You know, like, I don't know if I can really put it into the right words that says how important it is. Because it's not just me, it's everybody else who's involved too. Like, if this doesn't happen here, then there's so many places around the province that don't thrive and survive anymore. And if you can't thrive and survive in your community, then you have to leave. You have to leave a place that you love. And if you lose your sense of place, that's a really terrible space to find yourself in. Like, where are you supposed to be then? Like, I don't know if I could be me in a more urban environment. I don't know if I could be me if I couldn't, you know, within 10 minutes be out of the city and walk into errands. I don't know if I could be me somewhere that wasn't this island, off in the middle of the North Atlantic, stuck out there like a sore thumb with all this crazy weather happening around us. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I could be me somewhere else. And I don't really want to. Well, you know what? I have experimented because I have been other places, and no, I wasn't me anywhere else.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh yeah, great, Claire. Can follow me at all.
Tear.
We all have one single tear in our eye.
It's like baby seal.
Yeah, exactly. Put me on a billboard right now. Try not to get clubbed out here.
That's great.
No. Thank you both for like opening up your homes to us, and for being so hospitable, and for sharing there's such a like palpable connection to the place here that so much of home, like, people come and go, and so it's like they're not as committed to the place.
Right.
There's something really different in the air here, and it's nice to be a part of it. So thank you for giving us a glimpse into that and sharing it with us.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you
for
for
opening
coming.
up about this topic too, because I know it's a contentious one at times, and I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.